Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I'm Shay Mann, and I will be your moderator. Today's webinar is in listen-only mode, so if you have any questions throughout the event, please submit them in the Q&A panel, and we will answer them during the Q&A section at the end of the presentation. This session will be recorded, and we will email you a link to the recorded version tomorrow. Okay, now I'd like to briefly introduce our speakers. First, we have Dave Hendricks, the Senior Vice President and General Manager of Identity Now, SailPoint's SaaS identity governance platform. Dave's been with SailPoint for 10 years and has led SailPoint's client services teams and our Identity Now team during that time. Dave has been here for the deployment and ongoing service of all 800 plus of our customers. That, combined with his experience running SaaS companies in the past, gives him a unique view on how the cloud and identity governance converge. And next up, we've got Paul Trulove, our VP of Product Management here at SailPoint. Paul's been with us for 10 years, leading our award-winning innovative product teams. He's responsible for all aspects of product management and marketing for SailPoint and has been at the helm as SailPoint has become a clear market leader. All right, with that, let's go ahead and get started. I'll pass it over to you, Dave, to kick us off.
Great. Thank you, Shay. And thanks, everybody, for joining us this morning. So the goal of today's session is really to help you understand what it means to be cloud first, and more importantly, to discuss the implications that has on how you approach identity governance. We'll talk a little bit about how to be successful with an identity governance program in a cloud or hybrid IT environment. And then as we get into the end of the program here over the next hour, we'll talk a lot and we'll spend a bunch of time on whether or not or what questions you need to ask yourself as you get ready to think about doing identity governance as a SaaS product, identity governance in the cloud. And then we'll end the session with a look at what's new with SailPoint and an overview of our SaaS identity governance platform. So with that, we'll get things started. So the first question, what does it really mean to be cloud first? We talk with customers every day that are migrating to a more cloud-focused computing environment, and many who have a true cloud mandate with a goal either to be predominantly cloud or full cloud by some certain date in the near future. There are many benefits of the cloud model. I won't spend a lot of time going into those here. Most of you, if you're on this webinar, you probably are somewhere on that path anyway, and you understand that having a cloud focus allows you to spend less focus on the infrastructure and the management of it. There's an ease of use and deployment advantage, lower overall TCO, and in a lot of cases even just a desire to switch from a CapEx to an OpEx model. But instead of spending a lot of time telling you why the cloud is important, I think most of you will agree with that. We really want to talk about what the implications of that are and whether or not this is really a market trend or is this just a few innovative CIOs that are leading the charge of a small subset of the market. So obviously, from our perspective, and I think from most everybody on this call, this truly is a market movement. SaaS has evolved from being a consumer-focused technology to really being necessary across all aspects of your business. There's been a steady increase in SaaS adoption in the enterprise. The numbers that you see there, IDC actually estimated that by 2019, the spend on cloud services is going to be over $140 billion. Incredible growth from where we were just a few years ago. For example, I've spent 10 years working at SaaS companies prior to coming to SailPoint, and if you had talked to a senior person at an organization 15 years ago about purchasing SaaS products, you were risking your job in a lot of cases. Today, that is just a normal accepted part of the migration and the market trend that we're seeing. It is truly an accepted direction today. So another market trend that has really impacted this is the move to the cloud is mobile usage. 2015 market survey of 800 companies by BitGlass stated that 72% of enterprises support BYOD for their employees. This further reinforces the need for business applications to be accessible anywhere, anytime, from any device. A clear driver for a march to the cloud. And lastly, we have a survey from Netscope that identified that on average, each enterprise is running over 1,000 cloud services. Now, it is clear that enterprises are moving to the cloud. Not all at the same pace and not for all applications, but clearly the vast majority of companies are moving in that direction, at least in some parts of their company. And truly, a large number have become cloud first and are adopting SaaS products at an unprecedented pace. So more than likely you joined this webinar because your organization is somewhere on that journey. But what we really want to spend time talking about today is what are the implications of that journey. So one of the biggest implications is the way that we work has changed. With the increased interconnectivity and advanced technology, we've created a world where it's really no longer necessary for employees to be in the same physical space to collaborate. So business users now span employees, contractors, and partners who all access applications and data from a variety of devices, including their personal ones, from locations all around the world. What that really means is that for most organizations, they've had to recognize that protecting the perimeter is no longer sufficient. Why is that? Because so much happens outside of the perimeter. You have cloud environments and SaaS apps that are being accessed everywhere. You have mobile devices. You have collaboration with third parties and business partners that are really outside of your organization. So now you not only have an outsider threat, an insider threat, but you have the mixed hybrid version, the inside-outside threat as well. So the notion of a protective perimeter really just doesn't exist anymore. So SaaS brings with it a lot of benefits that we talked about earlier, but really one of the biggest is that it's a much more business-friendly method for accessing data. So if you consider just the sheer volume of users, applications, and various levels of data access, it's easy to imagine over 1 billion points of access for an enterprise to deal with. But these points of access can easily become 1 billion points of exposure. Most of the folks on this call probably associated with security and identity. 1 billion points of exposure can be a scary thing because behind all of those access points is a person or an identity. And as you all know, it really only takes one. One unauthorized user, one exposed account, one vulnerable access point to be compromised, and you put your organization at risk. So if you're going to be cloud first, you have to be more than cloud first. You have to be identity first as well. In today's environment, that is a necessity. So we feel, and I think the market feels, that you really need identity governance. In a cloud-first world with so many of the applications and connections expanding rapidly, you need complete visibility into all of those systems, applications, and resources on your corporate network. You need visibility into the users, their access privileges, and access privileges to those resources. And you need it at your fingertips. Once you have visibility, you can effectively begin governing that access to control it for securing your most important assets and data. And finally, and in order to be effective in an identity governance program, the security and governance must be a business enabler, not a business blocker. It must be the starting off point, not the end point. This is even more critical in a cloud-first environment where everyone can get anything that they want at the touch of a button. You need to be there making sure employees are getting what they need securely. So the way you do that is to take a user-centric approach to managing identity data across all your systems and applications, whether they're on-premise or in the cloud. Now the goal here is to implement strong governance controls that help to define who should have access and synchronize who does have access through a user's life cycle with the organization. You have to deliver an integrated approach across identity administration capabilities such as automated provisioning, access request, and password management. You have to automate compliance controls such as access reviews. You have to govern access to unstructured data and simplify how users gain access to the growing number of cloud applications with single sign-on. Until you're doing all of these things effectively, you're truly leaving your cloud-first organization at risk. That's the core of identity governance, and the reason why identity governance has become such an important part of the move to a cloud-focused business model. There's a reason why IDC predicted identity would be a $7.1 billion market in 2018, up from $4.8 billion in 2014. It's getting the attention of CIOs and CISOs at large and mid-sized companies all around the world. And if you're going to be cloud first or cloud focused, you have to have an identity governance program. So if you've kind of followed along with me and you're in agreement up to this point that if you're cloud first, you have to have identity governance, what do you do next? So you're a cloud first organization, you need identity governance. So what are the steps that you need to take in order to have a program that leverages both of those points? So at SailPoint, we've helped hundreds of customers answer this question, and we'd like to give you a structure to use as you determine how to execute your plan to control risk in your organization. And that structure goes across both a programmatic look and then into a little bit more detail around a product-centric view of that as well. So where do you start this journey? So although I'd like to tell you it's easy as, you go to the Gartner Magic Quadrant and you look for the leader, you choose SailPoint and you're done. But unfortunately, it's a little bit more complicated than that. At the end of the day, you've got to develop a business case to start this out. What's actually driving your governance needs? Is it security? Is it business efficiency? Is it time to deploy? Is it compliance? Are you trying to save money? Although it seems that, it would seem odd that anyone would skip this step, I've worked with way too many customers over the last 10 years who haven't clearly articulated what they're trying to achieve with their identity governance program. Although it's easy to get started without going through this step, it's extremely hard to achieve your objectives or to know when you've achieved your objectives. So create a solid business plan, including the metrics that will determine your success and failure. Define a baseline and an objective to start your journey off. So next, and once you've developed that plan, you probably are getting to the most important part or the most important step in this journey. You have to ensure that your organization agrees with your plan. And most importantly, you have to have the backing of your executive leadership. We haven't had very many failed deployments at SailPoint in my time here, but the ones that we have had are ones that are almost always caused by a lack of executive support. A program without executive support may get off the ground, but it probably won't last. You'll end up with funding challenges or internal organizations that refuse to give up their old way of doing things. You've got to have a strong backing to overcome those hurdles. And executives, by the way, doesn't just mean your CIO or your CISO. Although that is a fairly important person to have on your side, but you've got to also include your compliance organization, your security teams, your IT and business users. Our most successful customers over the last 10 years have pitched their business plan to all of these groups and gotten support across those organizations and have formed structures that allow all of those various stakeholders to participate in the program, either identity governance program working groups or steering committees, but there's got to be a structure that allows that program to continue and executive support that drives it. My experience is that doing this as an IT project, which we have seen a number of organizations do, doesn't really lead to long-term success. You need to work across the entire organization. So as with any cross-functional program, you've got to start looking early on at what resources will be involved as well. So what users are going to be involved, what systems, what organizations, how are you going to implement, how are you going to administer this as you move forward? Without a true plan, mapping out the resource requirements and the project timelines, you're unlikely to be successful over the long term. I'm always surprised by the number of organizations that come to us without a clear view of the how. How are they going to achieve the goals they laid out at the start of the process? You should be thinking about this from day one. So you're ready to hit the ground running once you get the green light. And obviously, if you need help with this phase, we have partners all around the world who specialize in helping companies set up these types of programs. We work with them every day across almost all of our customers. So the last step in this process is really a new one, and this is the one that we're going to spend a little bit of time on today and highlight. And that's the question of what is the deployment model that you're going to use going forward. 5 years ago, there weren't very many decisions on this. It was relatively straightforward. You just had to make sure you understood what your goals were, and then from there, all you had to do was choose which vendor you wanted to work with, whether that was a partner who helped implement or a product vendor. Today, that question is a much more difficult one in a lot of ways, but it's also a much better decision because you have a lot more options available to you. With the advent of cloud and SaaS, you can actually choose a deployment model that fits your organization as opposed to the only one available. We'll spend a little bit of time in the next few slides talking about what that might look like and what those different options are. But they really do span across a broad spectrum. Obviously you still have on-premise enterprise software, and that's not going away, by the way. Those deployments are still growing. SailPoint's business in the on-prem world is still growing at 30+% every year. But now you have additional options. You have the full SaaS option that we'll talk about in just a minute, which is a multi-tenant product. You also have managed service provider options. We have a number of partners that are actually providing Identity IQ hosted as a service. You have all of those options available to you. None are better than the others. They all have different characteristics, and your job is to choose and select which of those is right for your organization. So if the enterprise software deployment model is really well understood by security and identity managers and executives, then you have to think about where's the time that you need to spend, and that time is to understand the SaaS model. It's not as well understood, so we're going to spend a few minutes talking to you a little bit about how a cloud-based service model might be the right one for your organization. So the SaaS delivery model, and when I say SaaS delivery model, I'm talking about a multi-tenant product set that's delivered as a service. So, think Workday, Salesforce. Most of you probably have those services in your organization already. And the thing that's valuable about that is it allows you to do things a little bit differently than how you approached your work 5 to 10 years ago. And in particular, what you have available now is a way to look at identity management in a little bit different way. As in many of the other industries, the way that we've approached this is we've taken what we've learned deploying hundreds of customers with our enterprise products, and we built those best practices into our Identity Now set of services. Paul will talk in a minute about the specifics of that and what the product side of that looks like. I want to focus just on a few of the differences between the on-prem and SaaS models. So the first is there's a faster time to value. Deployments tend to go faster. Because we've built in those best practices, we've made the product more configurable than customizable. The result is the process for deployment tends to go a little bit faster. Our average deployment time with Identity Now is a little bit over 3 months, whereas our enterprise suite of products is a little bit longer than that. The other areas that you can think about are that there's really a simplified management approach. With no infrastructure to manage, the administration of the product becomes significantly easier. That's probably what's driving a lot of your move to the cloud in the first place. And obviously the easiest way to think about this is that we have a team that's monitoring and managing the application 24 hours a day so that you don't have to have a team that does that. Saves a lot in terms of time, but also in terms of resourcing, skill, and focus as well. One of the other advantages to look at here is because our model isn't focused on creating a platform that you can customize any way that you want, we can focus more on usability. So a downside of that, obviously, is that if you're a company that has really specific requirements that are outside of the current future capabilities of a SaaS product, then you can't just customize your way around it. The advantage to that is that you have this increased usability, and you have access to best practices across multiple functions and multiple industries that are already built into the product. So the last piece of this, and probably the most important to a lot of organizations, is that a SaaS model tends to be much more cost-effective over the long run. The biggest areas where you see this is both in the management of the infrastructure and not having to buy and manage that infrastructure, and in how you manage upgrades. Unlike in an on-prem model, upgrades don't involve months of planning and testing. Bug fixes in a SaaS environment are delivered on a daily or weekly basis to all customers at the same time, and as a result, your resource requirements for managing the product long-term tend to be less. Now I want to pause for just a second here and make sure I make it really clear. This is not all motherhood and apple pie. These are certainly the advantages to working in a SaaS environment, but it's not for every organization. You have to be willing to give up some amount of control and customizability, you have to understand that the features that you see are the features that you're going to get. There are, when we submit or when we release new features in the UI, you can't decide to stay on a version that is 2 versions old and just keep working with that for a long time. For a lot of larger organizations, that's a non-starter. For a lot of organizations, that is not a problem at all, and that's actually an advantage for them. Given that, what is the right type of customer for a SaaS identity governance product? We spent some time looking for what the consistency was across all of our customers of Identity Now and those that we're talking to and selling to right now. And the consistent theme was that there's not a lot of consistency around customer size. We have customers that are under 1,000 users, and we have customers that are over 100,000. That doesn't tend to be a differentiator. There's also not a lot of consistency around their experience level with identity management. We have users who have never had any kind of identity management product focus before. They've never used an enterprise product. They've done things manually, and they jump right in. We also have customers that have been using enterprise products for years. As a matter of fact, we just finished a deployment that was replacing one of our enterprise customers or one of our enterprise competitors. I won't talk about who that is, but you probably would know the list of folks that would be on that could be. They had a deployment of this competitor for years, hadn't been terribly successful in the deployment, and had decided that wasn't going to work. They deployed Identity Now in less than 4 months and got everything that they needed out of it. So there's really not there's not like a bar that says if you haven't done Identity Now or haven't done identity management before, this is what you've got to do. But it kind of cuts across all of those. But most importantly, the organizations where there's a good fit really appreciate and focus on the core value of the SaaS model that appeals to them. So they tend to have low risk tolerance, and so they're willing to modify their business practices in order to fit. They understand that a best practices approach and ease of use are really the most important things. They're okay letting someone else manage their infrastructure. They don't need to have the same level of control that maybe an organization that would go on-prem would have. And they're really willing to implement best practices instead of implementing exactly what they've done before with identity management. That's a really important aspect of this. In talking to many of our Identity Now customers, I've noticed a consistent theme among the leaders of these organizations, and this isn't necessarily a requirement for whether or not you decide to go SaaS, but what we've seen is that the leaders in the organizations that are choosing a SaaS or a cloud-first model tend to be innovative and forward-thinking. They're CISOs that are thinking about what the world's going to look like in 10 years, and they want their infrastructure and their identity and security programs to look like what they're going to be in 10 years, not what the market looks like today. They're willing to kind of stretch or to take different approaches in order to be positioned well for the future. And most importantly, and this is an area that you should all think about as you're deciding whether or not you want to make that jump to a SaaS identity governance model, is these CISOs and CIOs that have been successful generally have a lot of support from within their organizations. So that executive support that I talked about earlier is present, and it allows them to progress much more quickly with a SaaS model. So I want to give you an example. We talked about kind of who it's a fit for. I want to give you an example of an organization that did go all SaaS. This is kind of a small to mid-sized organization. They're relatively small in terms of number of users, but relatively complex as well, with 28 locations, over 100 applications being managed. They started out with a focus on access reviews. They had done them manually for a long time and had come to us with a desire to reduce manpower and increase their security posture. Their deployment, as I mentioned earlier, very quick. It was under 2 months, and got all of their critical SOX applications into Identity Now. The result and their projections just immediately after deployment were saving more than 2,000 hours per year just on access certifications alone. That gained them a lot of internal equity and internal support for the program and allowed them to continue their journey. They've actually now implemented our entire product suite within Identity Now and are using it across the organization. This has been, although this is a smaller organization that has been successful, we have other organizations that are in the 50,000, 60,000, even 100, and I think our largest is in the 200,000+ user category now that have gone down these same paths. The deployments last a little bit longer, and they tend to implement at a more measured pace, but they make that same progress that this company has. So the last piece I want to spend time talking about before I hand it over to Paul is to give you some questions to ask yourself. To make a determination if you're ready for identity governance as a service. So, if you kind of buy into what we've talked about up to now, if you're cloud first or cloud focused, you know that you need identity governance, and you know you need to create a basic foundation to achieve success. So look at your organization, and are you a cloud-focused company? Have you started to move your infrastructure to the cloud? Are you hosting with an Amazon or an Azure? Are you adopting SaaS apps at a pace that would make the company or your organization comfortable with identity governance being one or being a similar approach? In a lot of these cases, there's an executive mandate around identity in the cloud or around cloud-first mentality. We hear that a lot from our customers, and that generally kind of sets you up well as you head into the journey and doing that with identity. Second, are you flexible enough to redefine your approach? I talked about this a little bit earlier. Can you take advantage of a SaaS model? So can you get all the benefits of a SaaS model, but be willing to give up the customized approach, the approach that the organization has always taken for a more optimized, pre-configured setting versus that customization. Basically adopt the best practices as opposed to adopt what your specific organization has done for a long time. And then the last couple of things are, and we hear this all the time from organizations, that it's really hard to get good identity management talent in the industry today, and in particular those with enough technical depth to deploy the products that exist today. And so we've talked to a lot of organizations that are adopting Identity Now because they have limited bandwidth both to deploy and administer an identity governance program. And not only are the skill sets a little lighter for our Identity Now product, you don't have to have that deep Java knowledge that you might have to have with on-prem products, but the resource requirements tend to be lesser over time because it's more configurable and less customizable. And then the last question that you want to ask yourself, maybe the most important one, which is, do you have partners and in particular a vendor partner that is a product that meets your requirements? As I talked about earlier, it's not always the right fit, and so you need to evaluate very clearly what you're getting from the vendor partner. And I'm going to hand it over to Paul now, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about how SailPoint's Identity Now suite of services actually could possibly meet those requirements, and then talk to you a little bit about some of our newest releases.
Thanks, Dave. Your final point is definitely a great transition into the next section of the webinar. So let's jump in and discuss how SailPoint can help customers achieve their identity program goals, especially as you begin to consider software as a service as a deployment option. So when we step back and we look at SailPoint's approach to identity governance, it all starts with the user, and Dave made this point several times, in that we design our solutions very specifically to deliver visibility and control over all users, all the users that are going to have access to your internal applications. And more, that user base is changing and is dynamic in terms of day in and day out interaction with the systems. It could include employees and contractors. Those are the ones that we generally think of when we talk about identity governance. But as the organization expands and really looks at how we create collaborative environments, you also have to think about your business partners and your business customers. And so those are really critical. Next, identity governance has to span your hybrid environment. So that doesn't only apply to your on-premises cloud-based applications. It has to, or your on-premises applications, it has to also extend into your cloud-based applications. I've talked to several customers who have been thinking about approaching this in a more siloed fashion, where we'll look at one solution for the on-premises applications and a separate solution for the cloud applications, and that can actually create a lot of dangerous visibility challenges where you don't have that comprehensive view. And so we always recommend bringing those two things together. Similarly, part of taking a comprehensive approach to identity is also looking at how you bring your structured and your unstructured data together in terms of how you are granting and managing access. And so whether you're protecting information that's stored in an ERP system like an SAP or other kind of an application, or even a database, when you contrast that with what's happening from a file perspective in terms of unstructured data, your Word documents, your Excel, even PDF type files, and where those are located, you really do have to weigh and approach both areas comprehensively. And finally, coming back to Dave's point around the deployment options, you really do have to look at how you want to deploy and manage governance over a long period of time and make a decision whether that on-premises deployment where you may have more control over the actual implementation versus offloading a lot of the requirements to the vendor and looking at something more on the SaaS side with something like Identity Now. One of the key things when you look at your vendor partner side of it is understanding the relative capabilities and success in the market, and that's one of the things that SailPoint really prides itself on is delivering enterprise identity governance solutions, and we have very broad recognition as the market leader because of not only our commitment to innovation and building great products, but also importantly the commitment to customer satisfaction and making sure that as you start an identity project, you are successful in that deployment, both the initial deployment and then that long-term utilization of the tool. And both Gartner and Forrester over the course of the last several years have really recognized SailPoint as a leader in its respective market. So let's shift gears and focus now fully on SaaS. So everything that I'm going to talk about here on out is focused on our Identity Now product, which is our comprehensive SaaS-based solution for identity governance. And so if you're ready to take that plunge and put identity infrastructure into the cloud, there are a couple things that we think are incredibly important when you look at different solutions. As we discussed in previous sections of the webinar, there are a couple of things that really come to the front. Number one, you have to understand the business needs that you have as an organization and then determine whether the solution that you're implementing ultimately solves those needs. Not only today, but you need to look comprehensively and understand the entire program that you're going to be implementing, because identity governance programs tend to span not just months or quarters, but years and in some cases even decades. Second, understanding whether it's a true SaaS solution is incredibly important. And it may sound straightforward. Is it running in the cloud? We hear a lot of people talk about running something in the cloud. Well, running something in the cloud versus SaaS is an important differentiation in terms of what the ultimate experience will be, both from a deployment perspective and in the long-term maintenance perspective. You want to look at how the solution is ultimately architected to deliver the value of SaaS, because that will have a major impact on your cost of ownership, and it'll also have a major impact on the suitability for what you're trying to achieve by moving your organization to SaaS. And finally, you have to make sure that the solution can effectively secure your information and IGA processes. Security in cloud-based identity, I think, has actually been one of the reasons a lot of organizations haven't made the transition to a SaaS-based solution as rapidly as we might have expected. But one thing that I can tell you is, from a SailPoint perspective, we take security very seriously and have architected security not only into the product, but also our DevOps environment, And in many cases, I think the engineering and the expertise that we bring to the solution there is an incredibly important part of the value proposition, in that we not only have to secure a single organization, but we have to secure all the organizations that are using Identity Now. So that tends to allow us to maybe spend even more money and more time and more resources on making sure that security is truly baked into the fabric of the identity governance solution, not something that's wrapped on top. One of the interesting things that I have talked to a lot of customers about over the course of the last several years is the concept that access management or single sign-on is a good place to start and often sufficient to really secure access to cloud-based applications, and even in some cases extending into the on-premise world. So I think this is a good way maybe to think about why access management isn't enough to truly create a secure environment. So if you think about access management being a card key, right? It's that thing that lets you in the building. And so in the case of an application, it's the thing that lets you authorize, authenticate into the application, right? It's effectively assessing whether you should or should not come in the front door. It doesn't really govern what happens once you're inside that door in terms of determining who should have access, understanding how sensitive the access is, and ultimately driving what can be accessed over time. And so it really requires a combination of these two technologies in order to truly secure an enterprise from the front door all the way through to all of the rooms inside of the building. I want to come back to the picture we were just looking at a second ago and highlight the newest addition to the Identity Now solution, our Access Request Service. The new Access Request Service provides a complete solution for requesting and approving changes to user access across both your cloud and on-premises application environments. It's designed to be highly complementary with the other services that we have, especially when you think about how it will augment an automated provisioning solution. So, in Identity Now or Identity IQ for that matter, the automated provisioning is all about determining who should have access, and then as a user comes into the organization, changes their role within the organization, or ultimately leaves the organization, we can drive those automated provisioning events off of that HR cycle. Access Request then layers on top of that and gives us complete control over ad hoc access requests when people are interacting with the system or changing their projects on a more flexible basis. So let's take a look at exactly what that new access request service looks like. As part of the request process, the users are always coming in and trying to determine what it is that they need access to. And so we've designed a very simple, card user experience where you start with the highest level application, right? What application am I requesting access to? And then ultimately we'll get back to what level of access is required. So there's a very easy search paradigm. You come in, you find the access, you click on the request button, and then conveniently it will actually drive you to the next level of granularity if it's necessary to determine what you ultimately are trying to gain privileges to. So it completely empowers the end users to take on the responsibility of requesting access all the way down to granular entitlements and permissions without having to pick up the phone, call the help desk, or create a new service request. So a key value proposition both for the end users but also for the total cost of delivering IT services. Another important part of access request then is governing the approval process. Because at the end of the day, end users may not know exactly what they should request, and so you've got to be able to put in a process where you're vetting those end user initiated requests by understanding, whether a manager or, someone even higher within the organization needs to approve access to that. And so this is a good place where we begin to apply that governance policy by routing any request for an approval. And so you can see here I'm providing, lots of information to the approver so that they can understand who's requesting, what's being requested, and ultimately make that approval or denial decision in terms of granting the access. The other key thing is, capturing the information that's happening not only during the request process but the approval process, so that from a compliance and auditability perspective, we've got full visibility of who requested, who approved, and even tracking comments For example, saying, yes, I'm going to approve this access for 30 days while you transition from one role to another, or, this is a temporary job assignment, and so we're granting you access to something maybe you normally wouldn't have. I capture all of that data, I put it in the audit logs, and then that is there, if there was ever a question down the road on why something was granted and approved in the organization. So that brings us to the end of our presentation, and hopefully Dave and I were able to really plant some seeds to think about when considering how to address your identity governance needs, especially in a cloud-first organization. And we've provided you with a preview of not only Identity Now, but the new Access Request service that's now available. So with that, let me hand things back to Shay to drive our Q&A session. Shay?
Thank you, Paul. Just a friendly reminder, everyone is in listen-only mode. If you do have a question, submit it in the Q&A panel on this side of your screen, and we will answer as many as we can in the time allotted. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. Our first question is, Paul, this may be a good one for you. I need to connect to more than just cloud-based applications. Can a SaaS identity governance solution also connect to my mainframe?
Yes, absolutely. The reality is, and I think I mentioned this kind of straight out of the gate, the right approach to identity governance is taking a comprehensive, assessment of who has access, which means in a single solution you have to be able to span not only a cloud environment but also your on-premises environment, especially when you're trying to apply governance. And so the way that Identity Now handles this is we have a robust set of connectors that actually allow you to connect to not only your cloud applications, but also to your on-premises applications. We do the on-premises side through a specialized virtual appliance that creates a very secure connection into the data center, and then from there spans out to all of the applications that you want to bring in data for, and then ultimately provision changes back out to within the context of your identity governance program.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question. Dave, this is a good one for you to answer. So is identity governance as a service secure enough to use in the enterprise?
The short version, of course, is yes. So we've got over 100 customers. Almost every single one of them, we have gone through a security assessment process. Our approach, we know that we've been we're working in the identity management industry. Having an identity management product that is not completely secure in the enterprise would not be an option. So we've architected it from the ground up to be secure. We're going through a process now of getting certified by outside organizations to make that even more apparent to our customers and prospects. We're going through the FedRAMP process. We're going to have SOC 2 compliance, ISO compliance. We're already SSAE 16 compliant. Those are all, the outside stamp of approval, so to speak, that we are secure, not only from an infrastructure standpoint, but also how we run the business and a process standpoint. So I don't think there's any way we could have customers that are as large as the ones that we have on Identity Now if that were not the case. So you don't have a 150,000 person organization agree that your service is secure if you haven't done all the things that you need to do to be ready.
Great. Okay, next question. So what is the main difference comparing Identity Now to Identity IQ?
Yeah, very, very interesting question in terms of understanding your business requirements and then mapping that ultimately to the solution that you're trying to deploy. I think that the easiest way to answer that question is, from a broad capability perspective, the two solutions are designed to provide a comprehensive approach to identity governance needs. The specific implementation requirements are unique in that, Identity IQ is going to provide more flexibility when you want to, create completely customized business processes and deploy those. Whereas Identity Now is going to give you more of a set of configuration options and allow you to select the one that best meets the needs of the particular business process that you're trying to implement. Outside of that, the two are ultimately designed to meet the not only today's requirements, but I think importantly the emerging requirements that we're seeing around enterprise identity governance. And we will continue to invest in both solutions, to meet the changing needs of the market.
I think that's a really critical point. I've had a couple of questions. I didn't see this one here, but I've had a couple of questions from partners saying, does this mean that you're no longer going to invest in Identity IQ? Obviously, the answer is no. We do feel that both products meet the different requirements, and there are different types of users. That's why we tried to go through the webinar in the way we did today. And what we want is to make sure that there's a match between the approach or the deployment model or the features and benefits of the specific product and the organization that's using it. And so although there's an overall there's not a difference in the market need that they're addressing, there are specific functional areas, and really the only way to discern whether or not it's the right fit from a functional perspective is to go into a little bit more detail on an organization by organization basis, which obviously we'd love to do with you.
Okay, great. Okay, we have another question. So does Identity Now have connectors to connect to iSeries applications?
It does. We actually have a set of connectors that effectively map to the same connector set we have in Identity IQ, and iSeries is one of the things that we can connect and manage.
Okay. We have one more question. Does your SSO solution support desktop applications with Think Client?
No, the SSO capability is specific to other cloud applications, and so it is not designed to support desktop SSO use cases.
Okay, great. Well, everyone, that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Keep an eye out for an email from us tomorrow, and that will include a recording of today's presentation. If you'd like to learn more, contact us today with the number or email on your screen, or schedule a demo with one of our identity experts. Thanks to everyone who joined today. Thank you, Paul and Dave, for presenting, and we hope you all have a great day.